Yeah.
Got it. Okay. I am Chip Meehan. I am chair of the ad hoc committee for the Studio City Neighborhood Council investigating the Lake River Park development proposal. It is December 8th at 7:08 p.m. We are in session for a committee meeting and we are recording the meeting. Calling to order, present are Chip Meehan here, Terry Austin. Terry, would you say I'm here? You're
You have
muted.
to unmute, Terry.
Here, sorry.
Adele?
Here.
Peter?
Hopefully I'll be here. My IT guy is pulling my internet, so hopefully I'll be online. Here.
Okay. Michael?
Here.
Alex?
Here.
And we're still waiting for Tony and Melanie, but we do have a quorum. Scott Mandel is here.
Present.
Present. We then go to committee chair, me for 10 minutes. It won't be nearly enough. I have a lot to say. Kidding. Basically, I want to sum up the intent of this conversation is to review. Hello, Tony. Good to see you, sir. The intent, we're just starting. The intent of this meeting is to sum up where we are in the investigation. The committee was formed as a result of a report that was written in and around the public comment period, which expired in, I believe, May of this past year. A task force was formed to delve deeper into 5 principal areas of concern that had existed around the project for the last couple of years. We are looking into those. Everyone that wanted to be a member of the committee was accepted as a member of the committee. We did that consciously to make sure that there was no side in this hotly contested community issue that felt like they were being underrepresented because members of their constituency were denied membership. So everyone that's on the committee, everyone that asked got on, everyone that's here is the sum total of people that asked. It has been observed that we are a little bit lopsided in individuals who have historically evidenced opposition to the project. I asked Harvard Westlake a few times if they had some advocates that they wanted to move forward, and we weren't able to find volunteers. So the makeup of the committee is what it is. We tried an outreach. We've looked at all the issues outstanding. We had some familiarity beforehand. We developed great additional understanding as part of the review. I want to go through the document I put together, which I believe sums up where we are on the 5 issues and gives a path moving forward. Before I do that, I would like to read into the record a memo I got from Harvard Westlake. This is in response to some conversation I had with Ari as chair, going back and forth, doing additional research. And it is also in response to Harvard Westlake's review of the agenda. So I'm going to read the document. December 8th, 2022. Dear Harvard Westlake River Park Project Neighborhood Council Ad Hoc Committee. The agenda for tonight's ad hoc committee meeting indicates that you will consider 2 environmental aspects of Harvard Westlake River Park. We would like to remind you that the City of Los Angeles has thoroughly reviewed the environmental merits of the River Park project according to the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. In March, the city released a draft environmental impact report, DEIR, that examined a broad array of environmental issues from transportation and cultural resources to biological resources and greenhouse gas emissions at the proposed river park. The DEIR concluded that the river park would result in less than significant operational impacts to the environment in every area studied. Moreover, Harvard Westlake River Park features a number of environmental benefits that represent significant improvements over current conditions at the property. For starters, as California endures a historic drought, River Park will require significantly less water than the property's current use, a golf course. River Park's native landscaping and large stormwater capture system will also result in substantial water savings. Furthermore, the River Park will have 100% native trees and plantings. At the end of the day, the project will boast far more trees than currently on the site, and many of the newly planted trees will be mature specimens that are far larger than those required by city code. This will be a major improvement compared to the trees on the existing site, many of which are Mexican fan palms that provide little biodiversity support, few environmental benefits, and are in fact an invasive species. River Park will also be partially powered by solar panels on the roof of the gymnasium that will generate the equivalent to the electricity used by dozens of households every year on average. This renewable energy will significantly reduce the amount of electricity pulled from the power grid and the amount of greenhouse gas emissions by the park, River Park. Overall, River Park will meet the highest standards of sustainability. As you know, Harvard Westlake has made literally dozens of changes to the initial project plan to accommodate stakeholder feedback about design, access, and impacts. With respect to the specific environmental concerns expressed by the ad hoc committee, we will continue to defer to the legally defined and accepted CEQA process. For that very reason, we find it unfortunate that a number of the conclusions the committee has jumped to are false, misplaced, and/or unjustified. In so doing, the committee has chosen to disregard the findings of professional experts in relevant fields, not to mention the city's own review of the scientific and technical studies. We look forward to continued engagement with the Studio City Neighborhood Council as the River Park project moves forward. It is the school's continuing hope that the SCNC will join Harvard Westlake in creating a stakeholder steering committee to discuss and address issues that arrive as the River Park's plans are operationalized. On behalf of our school students, faculty, and staff, we extend our best wishes to you during this holiday season. Sincerely, the Harvard Westlake project team. So I've also sent a soft copy to everyone on the committee about that. I'm going to take questions now, I guess. Peter, go ahead.
Hi. Something was brought to my attention today that there's some laws that are building codes that are changing next year. I assume they'll apply to Harvard Westlake. I have not, I don't recall any mention about heating the swimming pool. Do you?
You know something? I don't recall off the top of my head. It's obviously going to be heated in their minds.
So with that is, as of next year, Los Angeles is phasing out gas appliances. So I know somebody who's doing an ADU, and for instance, their hot water heater, they have currently has a, I guess he has a hot water heater, but as the rules change to go to a tankless, it has to be electric. And just for a residence, they're requiring putting in a 100 amp breaker for just that device. So if the pool is being heated during the summer by the sun, great. But during the winter or whatever temperature it needs to be, if this rule applies to Harvard Westlake, then their electricity uses may go up astronomically and counter the point about solar covering their needs and not putting a strain on the grid. So that's something I think that needs to be looked at further. Also one other point, which is slightly outside this topic, and I think you know about this, Chip, that the question of the conditional use permit, and moving forward, we need to look at what teeth this actually has, because we're looking at a situation with sportsmen's that where they are just flagrantly violating their conditional use permit. And in an email that I sent to 30 of our friends at the city, which is everybody at city planning, building and safety, Nithya Raman's office, the representative for Midwood basically said they're not going to follow the conditional use permit. If we have a problem with it, then we can call their number and they'll deal with it. So if on this email chain with all these representatives from the city and they're all silent, moving forward, I don't know how you can take a conditional use permit seriously until we find out how to have teeth in it. Anyway, that's it.
No, that's great. And let's hold a further discussion on that topic towards the end, because one of the recommendations in here that both Harvard Westlake comes up with and we have in the agenda is, what would a steering committee look like? And when would we actually activate such a steering committee? But enforcement is important. And we'll talk about that later, but I discussed that with Ari in particular. That's the end of my.
I have some more, I have some comments about the memo.
That would be the committee member introduce themselves, which we've done. It's clearly a holdover. Public comment, I don't see. Is there any public comment for non-committee members? We
No
do.
comment.
There's one hand raised. Who's that?
No.
That's Peter.
Oh, Peter, unraise your hand. I got it. Okay. Anybody else want to comment?
Going once, going twice.
So I just want to say a couple of things. The ad hoc, the DEIR by Harvard Westlake does not, it's behind the times, if you will. The discovery of PFAS in synthetic turf and the new lawsuits that's actually, one of them was won recently for $40 million. For exposure to PFAS, that's new news. So that's not what was in there. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to mention about this letter is that the draft environmental report was paid for by Harvard Westlake and was not necessarily the city endorsement. The city is now reviewing the paid for by Harvard Westlake results, which came up with there is no environmental impact. The experts from Studio City Residents Association and from Save Weddington, Jamie Hall and Amy Mentier were very clear that there were significant impacts. And even in the DEIR, Harvard Westlake, their own representatives said that it may be that they have to move the fire station because of the access that Harvard Westlake wants. They want to do have a drive about on the paper road there that is right next to the fire station, and it's going to impact the fire station a lot. And their suggestions were that the fire station would need more equipment, more people, and maybe even possibly have to move. And so that's another, and then I have another thing. There has been some new to me, but maybe not new to the rest of you guys, science about what happens when you cut down mature trees. So mature trees sequester carbon in the soil and in their branches and in the leaves and everything. And, you know, there's 80 years or 70 years of sequestering carbon. When you cut them down, you release that carbon into the atmosphere. And then when you plant new trees, they actually are, I can't remember which is the term, carbon sink and carbon something, whatever, but new trees for 20 years are releasing carbon into the atmosphere. They do not start to sequester carbon for 20 years. So they're trying to say that because they're putting in natives, it's all great. But it's not all great, because those trees are going to be emitting carbon into the air for 20 years when we could have had the current trees still sequestering more carbon. And the problem that I have with that, and as many of you guys know, is that we're facing climate crisis and we don't have 20 years. We don't even have 50 years, or it goes the other way, but you know what I mean. We don't have the time to cut down mature trees that are doing the job that we need to do today. We don't have it, full stop. And that is maybe the biggest thing, the biggest problem that I have with this project is that it is absolutely not carbon neutral. It's not even carbon, it's just bad. It's going to release carbon, not only carbon, but methane gas, because that's what is in the synthetic turf. So all of what he's saying in his letter is completely refutable by science. And so I would like that to be recorded. I would like that to be the response to him. I would like us not to buy this line of, like, oh yeah, we've done our work and it's all good. It's not good. And that, by the way, is probably why he's not here tonight. So anyway, that's me. And you know me, I'm like abrasive. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be. So that's.
Thank you. Terry, you're up.
And I am a delicate flower, so.
You are. Everyone says.
I know. In fairness and for full transparency, what the Department of Planning does when people want to build something that does not meet the zoning for that property, the California Environmental Quality Act has a number of categories, and the developers are handed a list by Department of Planning, and they say, if you choose, you must choose from firms on this list, because we won't accept answers to the SQL questions from anyone else. So yes, Harvard Westlake did pay for the study, but that is the process, that they must pay for the study and they must choose from a list. Having said that, I doubt many of these companies would be in business for very long or be very successful if they didn't do their best to put the best, rosiest presentation of their client's project. Having said that, what troubles me about the letter from Ari Engelberg is that he makes it sound as if we must accept the DER full stop, which negates the actual process of then a public hearing and then a final EIR. So I don't know if Ari doesn't understand the process, or I don't understand what I think could very well be interpreted as a kind of an arrogance that we're supposed to just shut up and accept what they've written. And clearly that isn't the case, that everyone feels that what has been submitted is the entire or full scientific explanation. As Adele mentioned, we've had the EPA come out just in the last few months and take a stand on artificial turf. They constantly mention the Mexican fan palms, and they are in our area, and climate and biodiversity is very specific to an area. We have the California yellow bat as in our environment, and they're not.
Adele, did you just mute Terry?
No, did I? Can you? And they. Oh, I went. Did I go silent?
You froze again.
Okay. And what fascinating point did I freeze on?
You froze on yellow bat.
Okay, so the California yellow bat lives in the Mexican fan palms, and the California yellow bat's only food is mosquitoes. And since this is right next to the river, it's the butterfly wings in the Amazon jungle theory. So my point is that I am disappointed to see the letter from Ari, because I think he's kind of negating what the public input is. And he seems to be saying that we should just accept what has been written so far. So my problem on the ad hoc is that I was hoping that there would be a give and take about what after the DER came out, what experts that SCRA had hired, and experts that Save Wedding had hired, and individual experts in the field who had put in their own responses to the DEIR. It seems like he wants to negate that. So that's troubling, that there is a process, and we haven't even gotten to public hearing. So I was hoping too that we could work with Harvard Westlake and that they would respect what our continuing concerns were. And as Adele brought up, some things that when this was written a year and a half ago, I hadn't come up. So that's my comment, and I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Terry. Scott?
Well, thank you. As you all know, I've been very quiet during these meetings, but I feel I want to comment based on the memo that Chip read, where the Harvard Westlake claims that there's less than significant operational impacts to the environment. And then the next paragraph, they list the significant impacts to the environment. Now, a significant impact to the environment is not necessarily a negative or a positive. So in one sentence, they say there are no significant impacts and then tout all of the significant impacts. I find that to be double talk. And to me, it doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Michael. You're muted, sir. Thank you.
Likewise, I really haven't been vocal. I've been listening more than talking, but I understood the purpose of the committee was to ask questions, offer those, in seeking answers, and the city in their decision-making process and review, et cetera, would take those into consideration. What I'm hearing from the letter and what I've been hearing on all the committees is a lot of conclusions being drawn. So I think we have to pinch ourselves a little about the purpose of the committee. Even right now, just now, and this is just my observation, there are mature trees being removed and they're going to plant new trees. And we're talking about, 20 years of carbon emitting, and that there's no mention in the letter about anything related to that, but they use the term mature specimens. I don't know what mature specimens are, but they are actually recognizing the fact that there is something to do with mature versus immature. What impact that is, I have no idea. It's worth asking the question. And I think that's what I see the purpose of the committee being, is to ask those questions and not to jump to conclusions. I actually discussed many of these issues with some graduate students from the Bren School at UC Santa Barbara, which is, the Bren School for Environmental Studies, and discussed the footprint. They're taking out mature trees and they're putting it, and it was interesting, their response. Their response is kind of rolling their eyes. They said, the footprint of all of Studio City probably won't have an impact that great. We're not talking about the Sequoia National Forest. So while the conclusions are, yes, it may not be best to replace fully mature trees with mature specimens, an expert in the environment may say the impact is negligible when you look at the total carbon footprint, of California. So once again, I'm not an expert. I'm just seeking to ask questions. And the main thing I wanted to point out was, is that the purpose of the committee, to ask questions or to draw conclusions? Thank you.
One of the things we've asked, the purpose was to ask questions and come to a conclusion on these issues that were outstanding. And the conclusion, we weren't looking so much for a solution, Michael, because we weren't, as a committee, empowered to negotiate changes in the plan. And frankly, I don't think until Harvard Westlake, as the developer, hears back from the city to see what they've got, are they willing to actually make any changes, against the possibility that they get everything they want to and they don't have to change a thing.
Correct.
Assumingly, this would be the ideal piece. As far as is the scale of this, it's the largest piece of open land on the LA River in LA County. So if it isn't Sequoia National Park, it's still significant relative to the microcosm here, and the solution to the climate issues we're facing start in our own backyards. 90% of the urban canopy, 90% of the urban tree canopy in Los Angeles is on private property.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think holding them to a high standard, I think, is morally defensible, and I think from a policy standpoint, it's legitimate. As far as it, just with my pseudo botany background, the someone might have opportunistically, someone being a yellow California yellow bat might have opportunistically found some habitat in the Washington palms. They're still pretty nasty trees. They're still an invasive species. They are listed as an invasive species in California. There has been legislation that is not passed, but has been nominated to prevent them from being sold in the trade. So that shows how bad they are. They are a huge fire risk, the dried out fronds. They are prolific cedars. So they spread like crazy, and over the course of a very short period of time, they'll create a monoculture underneath the palms that make everything else go away. So then you have essentially a bioecological desert that's a fire hazard, and they drink water prodigiously, particularly during the summer. So when everything else around here normally estivates, which is what happens when a plant essentially hibernates during the summer, the native plants just hang on with the water that's there. Other stuff that hasn't evolved here grows like crazy during the summer and sucks all the water out, so the natives die. So I personally, and with a somewhat informed point of view, don't mind taking out the palms, and I spend 1 or 2 Thursday mornings a month down there with tree people, hacking up all the palm seedlings I can that have fallen on the greenway. The other issue with response to the mature trees coming down, the blue gums, they are absolutely big trees and they have sequestered carbon. They are not going to vaporize immediately upon being cut down, releasing all that carbon spontaneously into the environment. There are a number of planting techniques that have been pioneered in Norway, and it's like the Holkevagen. I forget how it's actually Holkevagsang something. Basically, the idea is that you take the serious timbers that you've cut down in a project, put them on the bottom, and you're creating a berm where you end up having sort of the bioswale that's down on the Zev Greenway. You put the larger timbers on the bottom, put smaller stuff on top, cover it with compost, and it takes forever for that tree to be biodegraded, but the carbon is kept in the soil. So there's a way to do that. We are not at a place yet to understand if that is the technique that is going to be used with this, but we can ask that when we get to the final environmental impact report. But it is absolutely a concern that that those trees are being removed. The plant list, I believe, is in the DEIR or in their plan as to what they're putting down. Keep in mind, and to the point, I think it was Adele's earlier, that this is somewhat out of date. This original plan was done 5 years ago, and a lot of legislation has changed in the meantime. They also have been, Harvard Westlake has been banking trees. They've been, going out and buying specimen trees over the course of these years, keeping them in large crates. So I do believe they have some pretty significant oaks and some other stuff that are in the largest boxes ever seen that would be planted. It still doesn't replace. So they're making an effort to get there. And Terry, I'll come back to you in a second, as long as I'm here. Going back on what Scott said, we just choose to disagree with the findings of the planning department, and that is part of the process. You can't tell me, and I was stunned when I first read the document, that there's really no significant impact. You're taking all the tennis players, you're taking all the golf players, you're moving them out and they're going somewhere. That's a displacement, that's an impact. You're taking the 16 acres that is, give or take, 80% permeable, 20% non-permeable surface, and you're reversing that to 80% non or semi-permeable. I mean, that's a huge impact. So you can't say nothing happened here, move along. This is a giant project. And then as we dug deeper into it, there were some things that we were concerned about, which we'll get to when we go through the agenda. But the artificial turf was a non-starter for the community in 2017, I believe. And I think that when we had the first community meetings that Harvard Westlake hosted at the 6, a restaurant on Ventura Boulevard. Community comment was, I don't want plastic turf there. So that commentary has been consistent all the way through the last 5 years of public comment. As it was brought up earlier, and Alexander's done an amazing job of collating the available research on artificial turf. It was understood to be problematic in 2017 and contentious, and the pace of negative information about artificial turf has been accelerating to the point where the EPA is, where it's possible the Cal EPA is going to actually put Prop 65 labels on turf saying materials known to the state of California to be carcinogenic are here. I mean, so that has gotten to be, our concern has become urgent over time now that it's better informed. The carbon footprint, I mean, and again, this is me maybe hearing what I wanted to hear, but I always heard that the project itself would in total be carbon neutral from day one. That was sort of a quote. As it turns out, what will be carbon neutral is the sequestration potential of the improved, air quotes, land as part of the project, with all the new planting going in, will be equal to what's happening right now, because habitat or not, nodding to Terry's California yellow bat, there is virtually no sequestration in a palm because there's no wood there. That's where most of the carbon gets sequestered. And that's why, to Adele's point, young trees don't sequester as much because they're not building that strong tissue that requires carbon to be tough, right? So that's the issue there. But so this, even if the sequestration potential is right, the DEI document shows that it's going to go from something like 1,162 tons per year of greenhouse gas as the facility operates now to something over 3,000, potentially in the mid 2000s, with the best of mitigation efforts, which include the panels. We are not in a place as a society, and our governments with the Green New Deals are not of a policy mind to accept new developments that double and triple the greenhouse gas emissions from these projects. So those are the two biggest pieces that, and we'll go through this, that are, to me, the obstacles against approving the project.
But our role would be to really influence the city, because as somebody mentioned, it's their role. Harvard Westlake pays for the DEIR, but it's the city's role to really make decisions and ask those questions and put the pressure. So once again, I see our role as the community putting essentially the pressure on the city.
Yes.
In terms of the carbon footprint, I'm sorry, in terms of the PFAS and the artificial turf, 5 years ago, no one ever heard of PFAS. Really, in terms of day-to-day, in the business community I'm in, that's all they talk about. So just in 5 years, there's been a heightened awareness. And I think I sent you about 3 weeks ago that the Attorney General is now going after people. So to me, just common business sense, that's going to be a non-starter for Harvard Westlake. I think it's just going to get impossible at this point.
Right. So the step would be, Michael, that this committee would potentially file a motion which we would take to the full board. So after our investigation, these issues that were outstanding historically still exist. More investigation has shown that the artificial turf is a much bigger problem than we ever thought. So what was a non-starter now is now full heels
Full
up.
stop. Right.
Right. And then so the board, if it accepted the motion, would then refer the motion to the planning department, the council, and then from that, separately, the sustainability committee could potentially forward that, if the board didn't want to the mayor's office and everyone else that was involved.
Got it.
Because
Okay.
but
I understand the process better. All
okay.
right.
Terry, I'm sorry.
there. Not at all. I don't want to go into a back and forth about the worth of Mexican fan palms or anything. But I think that every project, to Peter's point, when he mentioned about there's going to be some new Department of Planning rules, I've been taking part in a lot of Zoom meetings over the last year and a half with Department of Planning. And honestly, it's really disturbing to hear that what is being proposed and now what's been passed and is going to happen is they literally say, we have so much work and not enough staff to do it. So we're going to make checklists of things and that'll streamline the process. Well, that takes away the nuance of each individual area. This particular piece of property is the last 16 acres of open green space on the LA River. It sits on the watershed. The trees in this piece of property are very different than trees in Sylmar or West LA or Boyle Heights. These trees, because they're on the watershed, will survive the drought. So the fact that the Mexican fan palms do indeed suck up a lot of water, and you would never plant them if you were renovating a asphalt parking lot in Sylmar to be a open green space, you wouldn't use Mexican fan palms. However, the fact that these trees are only 25% through their 400-year life and are healthy and do sustain raptors and beyond my beloved California yellowback, but also sustain raptors. That's the other thing that was really given short shrift in the DEIR, that the native trees are more scrub trees. They don't reach the height that the raptors need. So that will negate a habitat for some of the animals that live there. They won't just move up like P22. They're talking about wanting to move him somewhere, but where would you move him? Because animals are territorial. Anyway, I don't want to digress into that. My point is that when we look at any project, I fear that if something becomes a checklist, that we don't look at the unique nuance needed for every individual project. And if the Department of Planning cannot do that due to the restrictions of staff or expertise or money, then that is what we can do because we live here and we want to advocate for our community. So and I will tell you, I've worked on 2 park projects. One of them was in the city of Beverly Hills. And part of the smoke and mirrors that happens with things like this, when you mentioned mature trees, and they say, we're doing more in the DER, we're doing more than what is required. What is required by a Department of Planning to replace a tree is a 28-inch box. That is a less than 2-inch circumference trunk. That's what fits in a 28-inch box. So to do double what we're required is a 48-inch box with a less than 3-inch diameter. So we are not talking, when they say mature trees, we are not talking 20, 30, 40-foot trees, which, by the way, I have their tree map. And if I knew better how to share my screen, I would show you. They couldn't fit in replacement, that 2-to-1 business. They have to be talking about plantlings. There's not enough room to take down 250 trees and replace them with 500 mature trees. So that's a real bait and switch. So that's my point. Don't want to digress. Done.
Adele, do you have something different, or can I go through and read what we've done so far as the agenda?
I have something different, but it might be in your thing. So if it is, you can stop me. But I just want to also point out, because when you were saying about how you could take the trees and, cut them up and put them in the earth and let them compost, etc. Well, there's no freaking way they're going to do that. They're taking out 250 cubic tons of dirt. They're going to take that to somewhere in Azusa. And that is a lot of dirt. It's about half of the Rose Bowl. And so if they're going to do that, and then they're going to put in over 300,000 square feet of buildings, that's like locker rooms, bathrooms, etc. Right now on the property, is about 5,000 square feet of buildings. Literally, there's a tiny little house and a little kiosk for going into the tennis courts. So, and there are probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bathrooms total on the site. So that's that change there on the river, that amount of buildings, that amount of concrete. That is going back to my whole thing about the carbon sequestration. It is I don't know, it's so not.
And we cover that in
Yeah.
the agenda.
And do you cover also all the excavation? Because I know that city planning thinks that that is a lot of excavation.
Well, let's go through what I sent out in the agenda and see if it's covered there, because again, we don't want to get into mission creep here. We had a couple different specific things we're looking at, and I think based on what we've all spoken about, maybe not. Maybe we have to go deeper. Maybe at the end of this meeting, the committee decides that we want to continue to dig. I think that we're 6 months after the end of the public comment period.
Yeah, pun intended.
And this is kind of like housekeeping for that. So I would suggest that we move something forward to the board unless you guys don't want to do that, and we'll take a vote. But just going to point 6, all right, so reading from the agenda, this ad hoc committee was formed to investigate outstanding community concerns about the proposed Harvard-Westlake project. We have researched the issues enough to potentially present a finding to the full SCNC board for vote and further instruction. The following is a synopsis of key findings. On artificial turf, the proposal is for 2 fields of artificial turf to replace the existing natural turf. This installation would have significant negative effects on the neighborhood in terms of A, creating a heat island effect that would raise the temperature of the neighborhood, B, negatively impact the soil column underneath the fields. It would have negative impacts on carbon sequestration, groundwater, and the health of the surrounding vegetation. And the point with sequestration there is the plastic wrap on the surface of the planet kills everything beneath it. And we're discovering more and more that the microbial action, everything happening in the soil, healthy soil sequesters a ton of carbon. That's why it's dark. And so we need healthy soil. C, artificial turf is only semi-permeable, which creates unknown flood risks for the neighborhood. It's, heavy rain, potential breaching of the river. We don't know what's going to happen with that much water on the top. So the Valley Spring homes are potentially at risk, and could the larger neighborhood. D, the PFA, PFO, microplastics leach and off gas into the atmosphere, soil, and water. At the end of its life cycle, artificial turf creates literally acres of plastic waste that cannot be recycled. So every 7 to 10 years, we're going to end up rolling that stuff up, and there's nothing to do with it but put basically hazmat at that point into a landfill. So the problem never ends with the stuff. Artificial turf is a hotly debated topic. The current research has environmental and consumer advocates touting studies that show the danger of this product, and in opposition, industry figures who attempt to prove the product is safe. So we have research that's going for 2 different directions, proving the point of opposing advocacy groups. Intuitively, covering the earth with acres of plastic exposed to the elements that demonstrably deteriorates in a short period of time, and I'm saying 7 years is a short period of time, seems inappropriate in a residential setting. We then go on with, we request an independent laboratory test samples of the product. We also await the decision by the state of California to declare artificial turf a carcinogen as ordered by Prop 65. There's a number of other studies coming up that will be germane to this conversation as it continues. And this section 1 ends with the preferred path for Harvard-Westlake would be the installation of natural turf in light of environmental factors, irregardless of the toxicity study findings. So is that in keeping with everyone's understanding and opinion? Adele?
Yeah.
Okay, you had your hand up.
Oh, sorry, it's old.
That's good. So, I mean,
Mhm.
again, this is my words, but this is our conversation, and I believe this sums up what we're all talking about. And but we lay out the problems and we give a potential solution, and the solution we see as maintenance and natural turf, understanding that there's playability issues. The one thing that we all agree on is you can always run on plastic. I mean, so we're going to end up having less public access to these fields, public meaning those people outside of the Harvard-Westlake community.
There is one thing you forgot there is the increased risk of injury.
That's their problem, I believe. I mean, yes, you're right, and we've talked about that.
I
But
mean, the NFL players don't even want to play on it.
yes, I agree that's true. And my son-in-law is a professional soccer player and they only play on turf. But I think that becomes nanny state. And I don't think we should tell Harvard Westlake or their parents how to take care of their kids. I think the community issues were here. That's why I didn't put that down unless you guys overrule me on that. I'm happy to put it in, but it just seemed like a side issue to the building of it in the community. Tony?
I guess I just had a concern. If we focus too much on the artificial turf issue, then they just say, okay, we're going to put in regular turf. And then is everybody then supposed to say that the whole project is okay? I'm not okay with it, no matter what kind of turf they put in, personally. So I know it's an angle, but I wasn't sure how we protect the point of view on this, that, you know, in general, there are other issues besides the turf that make this, a concern, which have already been brought up in the discussion tonight. So how do we do that?
The agenda has a point at the end where it says that this is not comprehensive of all the concerns the committee and the public have about the project. So satisfaction of any of these concerns doesn't guarantee approval of the project, but we should continue to talk. And what I'm going to do is recommend that, I don't know if this committee needs to keep going, but I think we could probably recess until such time as the final environmental impact report comes out. And then we can see how we can start working on those other issues as well. But we only had broad swaths that actually were part of the charter of the committee. So I didn't want to make it broader than that. But I hear you. So that being said, I'm going to assume that this is okay, the way it's written, unless you guys make a change. Point 2 is the greenhouse gas production, and this this is technical. It's a lot of math. It's 60 pages into the, thank you, Alexandra. It's 60 pages into the section where you start getting into the real nuts and bolts of the specificity of the project. What is written here is the DEIR projects a 3-fold increase in the production of greenhouse gases from the proposed facility. To me, that's unacceptable. This is unacceptable at a time when we need to limit and even reverse carbon emissions, and is contrary to the policy goals of the Los Angeles Green New Deal. I went back, I did a bunch of research on various bills that have been drawn up and brought into committee. Nothing has ever been voted and passed, but there's been an awful lot of noise with various senators and assembly members and people that are putting together saying that new construction must be carbon neutral. It would really be a leadership role if Harvard Westlake could actually go carbon neutral on this, carbon negative on this. I just don't know how that would happen. But further reading, the surrounding neighborhood would bear a disproportionate share of the increased emissions, but the entire community would be negatively impacted. This objective metric supports the characterization of the project as being too big for the neighborhood. And what I've tried to do, as I've tried to successfully or not steer the conversations, I wanted to get away from the emotional subjective stuff. And it's too big, it feels oppressive, always felt subjective to me, talking about the fact that it throws off all this greenhouse gas emission just backs into the fact that the project is too big. So the committee proposes Harvard Westlake submit a plan that combines carbon offsets, with Melanie doesn't like, within Studio City, and reductions in the scope of the construction of the project and its operations to be carbon neutral relative to the existing facilities and operations. So what we've said here is that the committee, us, propose that they come back with another plan that's carbon neutral. To do that, they're going to have to change the size and scale and operation of the facility. So lose the pool. The artificial turf, I don't believe is the decomposition of the artificial turf isn't even, as far as I can tell, counted in the greenhouse gas emissions. So to the point earlier of us disputing what's in the DEIR, because the math doesn't add up, it just intuitively doesn't make sense. You have to actually capture the decomposition of whatever it is, 10, 12 acres of plastic into the greenhouse gas emissions. So without getting into the nits and gnats, just because we could literally fall down the wormhole of all the elements that are there, they're being considered. But I think what we would want to say as a result of this is we want the project to be carbon neutral. And in spite of the efforts with solar panels, which we applaud, and the native trees, and the fact that 50 years from now, it will be a much larger carbon sink than it is right now, we have an immediate problem if we're asking that neighborhood to tolerate 3 times the greenhouse gas emission. Please come back with a plan that's neutral. Adele.
I think that the greenhouse gas thing should be first, not the synthetic turf.
Okay.
And I think the other thing about synthetic turf is that it emits methane gas from the time it's made until forever, which is, we know, like what, 50 times, or I don't even know the math, but some greater number worse than carbon
I think
CO2.
it's 25. I think
Yeah.
it's methane's
So,
25 times
and you
worse.
should lead with that in the synthetic turf when you get there. So, because I think really the bigger issue here is that this is, I mean, to me, I think the more environmental scientific issue here is that this project is environmentally unsound. And here's why. One, the carbon emissions, it's not carbon neutral. And then you can start with in the synthetic turf that it emits methane gas, and then go on with all the rest of your stuff, because that's really, and you can throw in, I do feel that you have to figure out how to put the amount of excavation and that impact on the community. You have to put that in there. And I'm not sure where that would go. You're smarter than I am on this, but I do feel like that should go in it. But I like it very much. I think it's very powerful and profound. I was talking to a lot of different lawyers at one point about this project, and what's the lawyer, Dean somebody? All he's doing right now is carbon sequestration. All he's doing right now is the math. I mean, more of what Michael was talking about the really big projects that are not, that are going to kill the planet. That's all he's doing.
Right,
So I think that's, yeah, go ahead.
So taking that, does everyone have the, so Alex, is methane one of the gases that falls off from artificial turf?
Yes, it's off-gassing methane from the day it leaves the manufacturing facility. As to the exact amounts and which ones emit how much, it's a difficult call.
Okay, so if I then, if I went to,
And by the way, I just sent you guys some back basics on concrete is also, by the way, a massive greenhouse gas emitter.
yeah, it is, and that's why, and I was trying to cover that in broad strokes as opposed to getting into, every brick and every piece of mortar that's there. Who's sharing? That's awesome. Who's sharing the screen?
Says Adele.
Adele, you
Sorry,
share?
it's me. Yeah, it's me. I couldn't unmute myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if do you want to cut and paste 2 and make that 1?
Yep. It won't let me. I think it's a PDF, so I can't do it.
Okay. So what we would do is under what says right now, if you go up a little bit, Adele, go to the right there where it says 1D subpoints 1, 2, 3. If at the end without 0.4, we just had, or maybe even, yeah, we can't do a PDF here. I would add a statement that says the off-gassing of the artificial turf contributes to the excessive greenhouse gas emissions of the project. I don't think we need to get more specific than that.
Great, great. But to have the other thing come first, I think.
Right, so-
Michael wanted to say something. Maybe he could
Michael, go ahead.
add some.
Yeah, all I wanted to say, I agree with all of the language, and I do think, yeah, putting the turf and the PFAS second rather than first is a good idea. I would encourage us to have Scott really help craft that motion if possible, because we're saying we want them to submit the report. Once again, I'm coming into this new and a bit as a novice, but I would state who they're submitting the report to, et cetera. And I think when this as the motion is fine, but the preamble to the motion or whatever language, when we ask them to submit a report, that it's crystal clear who that report is being submitted to.
There's protocols with.
That's,
where-
yeah, I
Yeah.
figured there would be.
No, there's a specific channel of,
And I've seen Scott craft those motions and they're pretty direct, so.
okay.
Yeah.
So so at this point, we're gonna add the off-gassing of,
Methane.
the off-gassing of methane, carbon dioxide, and others contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions of the project. Going to point 3, so basically, these were the community issues of light, noise, and traffic. This is sort of the soft stuff that we really started with. A couple things happened. One, we're pretty far out from breaking ground here. It seems premature to start. Harvard Westlake knows they can't have light and noise pollution. They know that traffic's a problem. We understand that the Sportsman's Landing project has shown just how overwrought the existing surface roads are from as we sit right now. So the idea of, it's a concern, right? How do we sit there and how do we handle the flow that's going to be required for more development in the streets? It's a problem. A traffic report only lasts 12 months, and in these days, not even that long. So it's premature to talk about these. Here's the way I've covered those issues to kick the can down the road. These issues are best handled within the jurisdiction of a steering committee that involves Harvard Westlake and community stakeholders, as suggested by Harvard Westlake. Even today in that letter, already mentioned that. There are 2 phases that need to be considered and will likely have different mitigation strategies, but the construction period and the operational phases, those are the 2 phases, need to be well managed. The composition, rules of governance, and enforcement capabilities of the steering committee need to be established by the end of the first quarter of 23 to be prepared for early stages of construction. There's some urgency with this, but this goes back to what Peter was saying earlier, that we're looking at Sportsman's Landing, which is creating huge issues in violation, creating huge issues, and there are COP violations, and there seems to be no enforcement. We need to find a way to enforce mitigation and force compliance with the CUP. A particular concern of the potential combined impacts of several developments. The city does not require any development to consider the cumulative impact of other impacts in the neighborhood. That's just not going to work for this. And it's not just the Sportsman's Residence, the Sportsman's Landing, and the Harvard Westlake project, but there are other projects which are popping up and down the immediate neighborhood and along the routes that the excavation trucks would take, that the users of the facility, once it's up and running, would have to travel. So we need to take a quick look at that, and we need to actually follow through all the way. So the projects must be evaluated in a manner that considers the cumulative impact. So a steering committee is something that needs to be approved by the board. And then we'll come back with the steering committee that works in the operation with Harvard Westlake, which would be different from another committee like this that would actually comment on the final environmental impact report. So those are two separate groups. Cool.
I have a weird problem. I don't like saying the first quarter of 2023 to be prepared for early stages of construction, because I think it implies that they're going to break ground really soon, and I don't think they are.
Okay, so you want to stop that sentence at needs to be
established. Full
Okay.
stop.
I
We don't
agree.
need, we
I
don't
agree.
need, I don't want to imply that we think they're gonna get, shovels in the ground.
Okay,
So, and then, yeah, the cumulative, I think you need to use the word cumulative impact. That is something that, even though city planning is pretending like they don't do it, they do have to consider the cumulative impact of projects, because you've got Sunkist, then you've got the bowling alley down to Witsit, that those people want to do a mixed use, thing all along there. And then
that-
sports, I mean, it's like the whole place is going to look like Encino in a matter of time.
so that's what this last sentence says. All projects must be evaluated in a manner that
Okay,
considers
right, okay.
the
good.
cumulative effect. Okay.
I
But
think
if
we
you
should-
take out first quarter of 2023, does that not allow them to kick the can down the road on?
But the thing is, they've been kicking the can down the road for now, how long, Terry? 4 years?
Well, they had hoped to break ground in spring of 2022. And now it's a year later and they're hoping 2023. But they don't have a single permit, and we haven't even had public hearing yet. So
So what happens, I think what happens with the community, and because we've been doing this for quite a while now, like how many, has it been 4 years, Terry?
it was they had their first community outreach. They bought the property December 2017.
Yeah.
We didn't tell anybody until June of 2018. They held their first community meeting August of 2019. But their plans were signed, sealed, and delivered in March 2019. And this is something that I wanted to say on the record, because in the letter that Ari wrote, he wrote that there's been many changes. What was it? How many did he say? Dozens of changes or whatever, many changes. The plans that were submitted in March 2020 to Department of Planning are to the brick the exact same plans that were designed by Gensler and stamped March 2019. There were no concessions. Not a brick has changed. There were promises, there were suggestions, but nothing has changed. I would like to write to Ari and ask him to list 10 changes that were made, because none have been made. There was a letter from Council Member Krikorian stating demands that he said had to happen for the project, but
I swear I didn't do it. I swear.
Right.
I was simply asking, do we want urgency or do we not want urgency?
No, the thing, here's why I say we don't want urgency. Because we as a community would like this to be resolved.
So
But
do you want to hold off on the steering committee until after the final environmental impact report is filed? There's public comment.
it makes sense. It makes sense not to push for, they are not, as you can see, they're not here tonight. Why?
I spoke with Ari at length about,
But really, why? You can't, he's not going to tell you why.
well, I mean, I think that they figured we were going to do what we were going to do. I mean, it's been clear that the artificial turf has been a problem all the way through, and it's become a bigger issue. And
But see, my point is that we keep saying, I've tried, Terry has tried, I know other people have tried. They don't want to negotiate with us in any way.
I don't think they would have to at this point until they hear back from the city, I think is what we're all talking
No, you're
about.
right. You're right, Chip. And that's what Tony said as well. I think it was Tony who said that, no, they're not going to make any concessions, nor are they going to really negotiate until the city tells
But-
them they can or can't build.
But let's remember what the mandate of this committee was, which is to take a look at these issues that were outstanding. There were 5 issues that the board said, yes, please look at that. These are the 5 we're talking about. Essentially, it falls down to turf, greenhouse gas, urban canopy or tree canopy, and then light, noise, and traffic. And we're going to get this back to the board. The board hasn't empowered us to negotiate. We're just individuals. So, and we're not empowered to negotiate, and they're not in a position. I would not if I were them. So yes, there are things we're going to ask for. This sets the framework for the conversation that happens when people go to the table. But yeah, we're not there yet.
So the
I did-
proposal is just to end it after to be established, period.
Mhm.
Done. I
Okay.
second.
I do think of all the issues too, you know, I know, and this is from Heidi from Save Coldwater Canyon, that one of the big issues for Save Coldwater Canyon was the amount of excavation. And they were only going to excavate 190, I think, cubic yards of dirt, and they're doing 250.
But that's
Um,
all, that issue is
You
with,
think that's later down the road?
well, and it's also, yeah, because what we're saying is you need to come back with a different plan because the
Right.
plan you have has too much carbon.
Right, okay.
So, I mean, it's like an easy way to lessen the carbon impact would be to lose the pool.
And
So,
lose the ridiculous,
well, I mean, there's a lot of things that could be done, but we're
Yeah,
just
Lou.
talking to each other in a vacuum if we do that.
Yeah.
The other issue that, if you look at point 4, leaving the door open for the fact that there are other issues, but the ad hoc, right? The list above is not comprehensive of the concerns members of the ad hoc committee hold about the project, but largely covers the specific issues the ad hoc was formed to review. There's other stuff out there, but it was outside of our mandate. As the HW River Park project moves further through the approval process, there will need to be additional opportunities to seek amendments from the developer. Satisfaction of the concerns above does not guarantee support for the project, absent consideration of other projects.
great, that's great.
I think it's well worded.
Okay, so could you scroll back up to the top?
Put my hand up this time.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even
That's
see
okay.
it, Terry.
That's okay. No, I just agree. with
Terry?
you. I think Michael made the point is that, yes, it's really important that we don't close the door on the, 13 other categories that we didn't cover in this. So yeah, I think that's really important. I'm glad it's in there.
Okay, could you go back to the top? Did I end up putting? So if we were to sit there and come up with a motion, so would we say something like the ad hoc committee tasked with reviewing the Harvard Westlake River Park Development Plan recommends the Studio City Neighborhood Council Board file a motion in opposition to the project in its current proposed form. And then have that as an opening to the motion. And then
For
go to point 6 and go from there.
You mean the greenhouse gases and then? et
No, go
cetera?
back up to the top
Okay.
because you need to tell people where, like, if
Oh,
6.
got it.
So if there was,
Oh, Scott wants to talk. He probably has some.
Scott, do you have an observation?
Sure. So what you would actually be saying is what you want the board to say. So you would say in your motion, the board of the Studio City Neighborhood Council opposes the Harvard Westlake River Park project at this point in time for the following reasons noted below, or however you want to frame it, and then go into, but the first line is going to be support or oppose. So that's how you say it, and write it as if you're speaking as if you're the board, and then that's how the board approves it
Okay.
or changes.
And
Yes.
we're opposing it in its current state.
Yeah, we need to have a vote on that. So, could,
Well, you have if the language is something like this, the Studio City Neighborhood Council opposes the Harvard Westlake River Park project in its current state for the following reasons, and then we have our list.
Yep,
And that would be it. That's the motion. I make
that's
that.
the motion.
I make that motion as I just said it. I can remember it. Do I have a second?
Second that.
okay, Melanie, hello.
Hello, apologies for being late. Too many meetings today.
Yes.
I've mentioned to Chip and I mentioned to the group that if you scroll down to the bottom of the next page up a little bit, just to the bottom of the page before.
This one?
No,
Oh,
you're
sorry.
scrolling down. No, bottom of,
Bottom of page 2.
Okay, okay.
there you go. Okay. Carbon offsets are meaningless, and I know what Chip is thinking here. I don't know if you discussed it already, but I think carbon offsets are meaningless, and I hate including that in a recommendation. So I'm fine with it if we can just modify that bit to remove the part about carbon offsets.
What do you say instead?
We just take out carbon offsets. So what we say is,
Submit a plan that demonstrates reductions in the scope of the
In the
construction
scope
of the
of
project.
construction.
Yeah, and operations to be carbon neutral.
Oh, fine. Easy.
Okay, thanks.
Yep,
Friendly amendment accepted, Chip? I accept it. If I'm kind of putting the motion out, I accept that friendly amendment.
so that's it. That will now read, the committee proposes Harvard Westlake submit a plan that demonstrates reductions in the scope of the construction of the project and its operations to be carbon neutral relative to the existing facilities and operations.
Correct. Right. And you're gonna move the first thing up and you're gonna add the thing about offset the gases on the artificial turf.
Yes.
Okay, so any other discussion on them? Can I, you should do it. Go ahead, Chip, sorry.
No, that's okay. So the motion before the committee is to have a motion forward to the board that starts off with the Studio City Neighborhood Council opposes the Harvard Westlake River Park project in its current state. And then we go for the
Okay.
following.
for the following reasons.
For the following reasons.
And then you do the gases, the turf, the traffic, and then your other issues. Yep.
Yes.
With the amendment that Melanie just gave.
Yes, so that change would be, so other than the reorganization with greenhouse gases going before artificial turf, we add another line talking about the off-gassing of methane and carbon dioxide contribute to the excessive greenhouse gas emissions of the project, but may not be captured in the current DEIR.
Great, that's great line. Yes. Okay, can I call for a vote?
Sure.
Call for a vote?
Okay, so Chip, aye. Terry,
Aye.
Adele,
Yes.
Melanie,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes,
and Alex.
Yes.
Okay, Joe is not present. Okay, motion's passed. We will forward it. I will come up with the revised copy and send it to everyone for approval to make sure I did this accurately. And I'll forward it off. So Scott, this gets forward. Do we just hold this pending a special meeting?
We're meeting in January, the third Wednesday. I don't think there will be a board meeting between now and then.
Okay, so this will,
I could ask, but most of the board has chimed in and said they don't want to meet in December. So I don't think we would even get a quorum.
Okay,
It might be nice, just as a thought, Scott, it might be nice to do a special meeting because I'm gonna have a zoo, motion. And you know what? You're gonna end up having a full meeting if you do, if you wait that long. And it might be nice to have one like, a few 10 days or something after I don't know. It
Sure.
might be nice to have an earlier meeting.
Right.
And make it a smaller meeting. So because I'm worried, my concern is that Harvard Westlake's gonna, the DEIR is gonna come out in January. And it would be nice for us to have this in as a CIS before then.
because then we start this all over again, Terry,
Yeah,
correct? So
yeah.
Once the,
We should have, the Studio City should really weigh in on this sooner rather than later. You're muted, Terry.
I see my lips flapping and no noise. Yes, it is important that we get it passed so that we can go to other neighborhood councils to see if they are interested in this issue as well. And if we wait until January to pass it on our own, we'll be behind the 8 ball because Dell's right. We don't know when the public hearing will be held. There's a very good chance it'll be in the early new year because Harvard Westlake has indicated to the staff that they will be closing in May or June. So if they were ready to actually put a fence around the place and start demolishing it, it's because they have some knowledge that the public hearing would be over by February and they'd be pulling the permits in March and April.
So once you have the motion finalized and you get it to me, then I can start polling the board and see if I can get a quorum for a meeting in advance of the third Wednesday. Remember, we did Sportsman's in a regular board meeting and there was a lot of comment, but we still had a sort of a reasonably long or short meeting. Just make sure when you write Harvard Westlake River Park project, you put the case number and all of the city numbers in that. And really, that's all you need to do to be official. And once I get it, I'll try to get 8 people to agree. We can do it in December. We can do it in early January. But
Well,
if
you got Chip and Adele, so and yourself, that's 3.
we got 3. Okay. I don't see any other board members, but maybe, yeah. We'll work on that. Just finalize what you're gonna do and get it to me, and then I can work with it.
okay. I mean, and I don't see this as being, a major festival of conversation, because this is sort of,
Pro forma.
well, and because this is really finishing the paperwork that was due in May. Right, so I mean, everyone but us has moved on from this stage of it. So now what we'll do after this is take a look at the final EIR and see how we go from there.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else, folks?
Thank you, Chip. Good job.
Thanks, Chip.
Move
Really
to
good
adjourn.
job.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All the dogs are saying
There's-
enough Zoom for the night.
Oh my
There's the
God, that
puppy.
is such a cute dog, Scott. Yours is cute too, Terry.
Yeah, the dogs have weighed in saying off,
Oh
enough.
my
time."
God. He is really
everyone.
cute.
Aw,
Yeah.
Aw.
little Westy.
Aw. Aw.
Cute patoots. Oh, all
Oh
the
my
dogs.
God, he's so cute. He's cute. You're muted, Terry. Yours is very